Ladies and gentlemen, the world we live in today is not shaped only by technology, money, or power. It is shaped by stories. Stories of nations, stories of struggles, stories of decisions that can change the destiny of millions. And sometimes a single act, a single missile launched from a forgotten corner of the world can shake global politics and forced us to ask questions we never thought of before. In Yemen, a country torn apart by years of war and poverty suddenly launched missiles at Israel. Many people were shocked. Some asked, why now? Others wondered, what does this mean for the Middle East, for Europe, for the world? But very few tried to understand the deeper message behind this bold move. This is not just about missiles. It is about survival, identity, power, and influence. It is about how even the weakest voice can echo across continents when it chooses the right moment to speak. And it is about how we, sitting far away, are still connected to decisions made in deserts thousands of miles from here. In the next few minutes, I will take you on a journey, not just to explain what happened, but to uncover the mystery behind it. We will go beyond the headlines, beyond the politics, and discover the hidden forces that drive nations to act the way they do. And if you stay with me until the end, I promise, you will not only understand Yemen's missiles, you will also understand how small actions can shape the big picture of our world. So, sit back, open your minds, and let us begin this journey together. So the background of the Yemeni tensions cannot be understood without looking at the layers of history, ideology, and regional politics that define both countries' positions. Yemen, situated at the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, has for decades been caught in internal strife, tribal rivalries, and external interference. Since 2015, the conflict between the internationally recognized Yemeni government and the Houthi movement has turned the nation into one of the most unstable states in the Middle East. The Houthis, who adhere to the Zaydi branch of Shia Islam, have long positioned themselves against Israel, often framing the struggle within the larger narrative of resistance against Western bad power. For them, Israel represents more than a distant state. It symbolizes the political and military influence of the West in the region. While Yemen has no direct border or territorial dispute with Israel, the animosity comes through ideology and alliances. The Houthis frequently include anti-Israel slogans in their political rhetoric, presenting themselves as defenders of Palestine. Their narrative emphasizes that resisting Israel is part of resisting imperialism and oppression. This positioning has won them some measure of support among populations in the Arab and Muslim world who see the Palestinian struggle as central to the Middle Eastern identity. Another dimension is the influence of Iran. Tehran has long supported groups that share its opposition to Israel and the West, and the Houthis are part of this broader strategic network. By aligning themselves with Iran's ideological stance, the Houthis not only gain resources and backing, but also enhance their own image as part of a regional axis of resistance. This connection has deepened the perception of hostility between Yemen and Israel, even though they are geographically and historically distant players. Israel, on the other hand, has traditionally viewed Yemen not as a primary adversary, but as part of the broader Iranian threat network. The growing military capabilities of the Houthis, including drones and ballistic missiles, have made them a more credible actor in regional conflicts. Their strikes on international shipping lanes in the Red Sea have already drawn attention from Israel, the US, and European powers. As the reach expands, the possibility of targeting Israel directly becomes more real, creating a new layer of tension in an already volatile region. In this way, the background of Yemen-Israel tensions is less about direct conflict and more about symbolism, ideology, and alignment within a regional power struggle. What began as rhetoric and positioning has slowly evolved into tangible threats, making the relationship one of the most unpredictable dynamics in the Middle East. The sudden decision by Yemen to launch missiles at Israel cannot be separated from the immediate triggers that shape the timing of this action. For years, the Houthis in Yemen have expressed hostility toward Israel, but turning that rhetoric into direct military action required a catalyst. The most visible factor is the ongoing conflict in Gaza, which has reignited strong sentiments across the Arab and Muslim world. The images of destruction and civilian suffering have fueled outrage, and the Houthis, who style themselves as defenders of oppressed peoples, seized this moment to project solidarity. By attacking Israel directly, they positioned themselves as active participants in the Palestinian cause, rather than passive commentators on the sideline. Timing also reflects the Houthi strategy to elevate their standing both domestically and internationally. Internally, Yemen is fractured, and the Houthis need to demonstrate strength and legitimacy to their base. A missile strike against Israel, a country widely seen as a powerful adversary, provides them with a narrative of resistance that strengthens their control and boosts morale among their supporters. It sends a signal that despite the humanitarian disaster in Yemen, they remain capable of projecting power beyond their borders. At the regional level, the Houthis' action serves multiple purposes. It aligns them more closely with Iran's broader strategy of pressuring Israel and the West, especially at times of heightened conflict. This alignment is not only ideological but also practical, as it ensures continued Iranian support in terms of weapons, intelligence, and political backing. Moreover, it challenges Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, many of whom are moving toward normalization with Israel. By targeting Israel, the Houthis undermine these diplomatic efforts and present themselves as the uncompromising alternative. There is also the international dimension to consider. Yemen has often been overlooked by Western powers, except in the context of humanitarian aid. By launching missiles at Israel, the Houthis force themselves into global headlines and demand recognition as a player in larger geopolitical struggles. This act disrupts the narrative that Yemen's conflict is isolated or purely domestic. Instead, it shows that the war in Yemen can spill over into regional and international arenas, raising the stakes for all involved. The timing of this escalation is therefore a calculated move that combines symbolism, domestic politics, and regional strategy. It is less about Yemen's direct conflict with Israel and more about capitalizing on a moment of heightened tension to assert relevance and reshape perceptions of their power. The role of the Houthis in Yemen's decision to launch missiles at Israel is central to understanding the event. Emerging from the northern Saada province in the early 2000s, the Houthis began as a religious political movement rooted in Zaydi revivalism. Over time, the identity shifted from a localized insurgency into a powerful militia that has come to dominate much of Yemen. Their slogan, often chanted and written on banners, explicitly calls for resistance against Israel and the United States, showing that their ideology has long placed Israel at the heart of their narrative of struggle. This ideological stance is not incidental. It is carefully cultivated to frame the Houthis as part of a broader resistance front against what they perceive as oppression and foreign domination. Beyond ideology, the Houthis' role is also strategic. They have invested heavily in building up military capabilities, ranging from drones to medium-range ballistic missiles. These are not tools intended solely for local battles against Yemeni rivals or Saudi-led coalitions. They are also intended to project power outward, demonstrating that the Houthis are more than a domestic insurgent group. By targeting Israel, even if the strikes are intercepted or symbolic in nature, the Houthis showcase their ability to reach beyond their immediate borders, shifting their image from the regional militia to an international actor within the anti-Israel and anti-Western bloc. Their role must also be seen through the lens of political legitimacy. The Houthis lack widespread recognition as the official government of Yemen, and their international standing remains limited. Engaging in high-profile actions, such as missile strikes against Israel, provides them with political capital. It positions them as defenders of Palestine, a cause with broad appeal across the Middle East. This appeal allows them to garner sympathy, attract new supporters, and strengthen alliances with groups and states aligned against Israel. Another element of their role lies in their partnership with Iran. While the Houthis retain a degree of independence, their military and ideological trajectory is deeply influenced by Tehran. This relationship amplifies their capacity to act, ensuring that their strikes against Israel are not dismissed as isolated acts of rebellion, but recognized as part of a broader geopolitical confrontation. Thus, the Houthis' role is both symbolic and tactical, embodying the intersection of ideology, military ambition, and regional politics in ways that resonate far beyond Yemen's borders. Regional power dynamics are perhaps the most decisive factor in explaining why Yemen's conflict suddenly expanded to Israel. The Middle East is not simply a collection of isolated struggles. It is a network of overlapping rivalries, alliances, and proxy wars where each player seeks to shift the balance of power in its favor. Yemen's missile strike cannot be seen as an isolated decision by a local faction, but rather as a move that intersects with the ambitions of larger regional powers, especially Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran's role is particularly critical. For decades, Tehran has built a network of allied groups across the region, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to militias in Iraq and Syria, all of which share a common hostility toward Israel and the United States. The Houthis have increasingly become part of this network, acting as Iran's southern front. Their willingness to target Israel demonstrates that Iran's influence now stretches from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, creating pressure points that can be activated simultaneously in times of crisis. For Saudi Arabia, the situation is equally sensitive. Riyadh has fought the Houthis for years, fearing that an Iranian-backed militia on its southern border undermines its national security. At the same time, Saudi Arabia has been engaged in delicate negotiations over normalization with Israel, encouraged by the United States. A Houthi strike on Israel disrupts this narrative by highlighting the risks of aligning too closely with Tel Aviv while regional conflicts remain unresolved. It forces Saudi Arabia into a complex position where it must weigh its rivalry with Iran and the Houthis against its strategic ambitions with Israel and the West. Other regional actors, such as the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Qatar, also watch these dynamics closely. Each of them understands that Yemen's actions, though seemingly small compared to the military capabilities of larger states, can ignite wider confrontations. Even Egypt, which controls the Suez Canal, views instability near the Red Sea with alarm, as maritime trade and global energy routes could be disrupted. In this sense, the regional power struggle is not only military, but also economic and political. Israel, on its part, recognizes that the missile launch is not simply a Houthi provocation, but a test of its ability to withstand multi-front threats. Surrounded by hostile groups aligned with Iran, Israel interprets Yemen's move as part of a broader encirclement strategy. Thus, the strike highlights the fragile equilibrium of the Middle East, where the ambitions of regional powers converge and every action reverberates far beyond the battlefield. The global reactions to Yemen's sudden missile strike on Israel reveal how interconnected the modern world has become when it comes to security and conflict. For Western capitals, especially in Europe and the United States, the move was alarming not only because it represented a direct attack on Israel, but also because it risked widening an already volatile regional war. Governments in London, Paris, Berlin, and Washington quickly issued statements condemning the strikes and reiterating their commitment to Israel's security. Their concern was not simply about solidarity with Israel, but about the possibility of a chain reaction where one strike could lead to retaliations and eventually pull multiple countries into a spiral of confrontation. For Europe, the reaction was shaped by both security and economic concerns. The Red Sea and al-Mandab Straits near Yemen are critical maritime choke points for global trade and energy shipments. Any escalation involving Yemen has the potential to disrupt shipping lanes that connect Europe with Asia, raising costs, slowing supply chains, and threatening energy security. European nations already facing fragile economies are deeply sensitive to such risks. The missile strike thus reinforced the fear that local conflicts in the Middle East can easily spill over into global markets, creating instability far beyond the battlefield. The United States, which already maintains military assets in the region, also viewed the attack through the lens of its broader strategy. Washington understands that the Houthis are part of Iran's network of influence, and a strike on Israel is not only a threat to its ally, but a challenge to American power projection in the Middle East. As a result, the U.S. has been quick to discuss strengthening missile defense systems, expanding cooperation with Israel, and ensuring that allies in the Gulf remain aligned. On the international stage, organizations such as the United Nations have expressed concern about escalation and urged restraint. While such appeals often carry limited practical weight, they reflect the widespread anxiety that even a single missile strike can unravel years of fragile diplomacy. Global markets responded nervously, with spikes in oil prices and renewed debates about energy diversification. Meanwhile, countries outside the West, including Russia and China, have observed the development with strategic interests. Both see opportunities to exploit divisions within Western alliances while presenting themselves as alternative mediators. Their reactions highlight that Yemen's actions are not only a regional provocation, but a global signal, reminding the world that instability in one corner of the Middle East can reshape international politics in profound ways. The bigger picture behind Yemen's missile strike on Israel lies in how this act fits into the shifting balance of power across the Middle East and its implications for global security. At first glance, the strike might appear to be a bold but isolated gesture by the Houthis. Yet, when examined more closely, it reveals a deeper trend. Local conflicts are no longer confined within national borders, but increasingly spill outward, influencing regional strategies and international calculations. Yemen, a country struggling with famine, displacement, and civil war, is not typically seen as a major power, but by targeting Israel, it has elevated its relevance and tied its struggle into the wider confrontation that defines the Middle East. The incident underscores how the Palestinian issue continues to serve as a rallying point across the Arab and Muslim world. Even countries geographically distant from Gaza or Jerusalem feel compelled to take positions, and groups like the Houthis use the cause as a platform to build legitimacy by inserting themselves into the Israeli-Palestine conflict. The Houthis transform their domestic war into part of a broader regional narrative, one that resonates strongly with populations beyond Yemen. This demonstrates how symbolic acts of aggression can reshape political landscapes far beyond the immediate battlefield. From a strategic perspective, the missile launch also highlights the extent of Iran's regional influence. Tehran has successfully cultivated a network of allied groups capable of exerting pressure on Israel and Western powers from multiple fronts. This creates a scenario in which Israel, already managing tensions with Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Syria, now faces potential threats from the south as well. For Israel, the bigger picture is not just about defending against individual strikes, but preparing for a multi-front challenge that could stretch its defenses and test its alliances. For the wider world, the development is a reminder of how fragile global stability remains. Maritime trade routes near Yemen are essential for oil and goods moving between continents, and any escalation threatens these arteries of the global economy. European and Asian nations, heavily dependent on uninterrupted trade, are particularly vulnerable. The strike also deepens the sense that the Middle East remains a region where unresolved disputes and rivalries can quickly escalate into crises with international consequences. In this sense, the bigger picture is one of interconnection. Yemen's actions are not an isolated act of defiance, but part of a chain that links local struggles to the global order, reminding us that no region exists in isolation. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have explored today is not simply an incident of missiles fired across the skies. It is a mirror reflecting the complexity of our world. Yemen's strike on Israel is more than a headline. It is the story of a fragile nation projecting its voice through conflict, of regional powers playing their strategic games, and of the global community reminded once again that instability in one corner of the Middle East can echo across continents. But the lesson is clear. Every action on the geopolitical stage carries layers of meaning. For Yemen, it was about identity, legitimacy, and alliances. For Israel, it was about defense and survival. For the wider region, it was about the struggle for influence. And for the world, it was a call to recognize how interconnected our security and prosperity truly are. As we move forward, the real challenge is not only to analyze these actions, but to ensure they do not push us further into cycles of endless confrontation. Dialogue, diplomacy, and foresight remain our greatest tools in preventing regional sparks from becoming global fires. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your willingness to think beyond the headlines. May wisdom guide us in understanding these complex realities, and may peace remain the ultimate goal. I wish you all good luck in your endeavors, and once again, thank you.